Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Doman Learning question and answer session. This is a session we do every month here at Doman Learning, where parents can join from around the world and ask us questions about the Doman method teaching methods, the early childhood education, early reading and math, and just parenting questions in general. So wherever you are around the world, welcome. And go ahead and start to throw your questions into the comments box. This is only a 30-minute Q&A. So sometimes I get a lot of questions at the very end and I can't get to all of them. So I do recommend you try to get in your questions as quickly as possible. We will be starting with questions that are pre-submitted by parents in our Doman Learning Parents Facebook group. This is a Facebook group specifically for parents who have enrolled in Doman Learning courses like the Reading Before School course, the Math Before School course, the Doman Baby course, and so on. If you have enrolled in one of our courses and you're not in the Doman Learning Parents group, I highly recommend you join. That way you can get your questions in advance of these sessions, and I'll start off with your questions. Now, before I get to those pre-submitted questions, I just want to make a couple of announcements. First of all, this is our last question and answer session of the year. So in January for our next session. And also, if you want to purchase something at domanlearning.com, we have a coupon code Spencer10 that you can use that gives you 10% off at checkout. So go to domanlearning.com. Any course that you purchase, it doesn't matter which course, which bundle, you can use the coupon code Spencer10 at checkout and get 10% off. All right. Well, we can go to questions now. And the first question that came in, which actually is more of a comment, but it's really a nice one, comes from Kos. Kos says, "This time I don't have any questions, but I'd like to use this opportunity to thank the entire Doman family once again for their amazing educational methods. We have been using them for 2.5 years already, starting right from our baby's birth, and the results are simply amazing. Happy New Year and Merry Christmas to the Doman family. Thank you very much for your efforts in making this world brighter." Thank you so much, Kos. And it's been a pleasure having you join these sessions over the last couple of years and talk about your child's progress on the programs. I'd love to hear more and more about what results you've seen from the program, because we actually have a question later on from another parent about how long does it take to see results. So I'd love to hear about your experience, and I'm sure other parents would find that helpful. All right, I've got a question here from Dominica. Dominica says, "Hi, my baby is 5.5 years old. We started Doman method reading and math when she was about 4 months old. We have got the Italian Doman flashcards. I'm very enthusiastic about your method. I have a couple of questions." So Dominica's first question is, at what age or at what months do you recommend going to couplets and sentences? Okay, so let me answer that question first. So it's not about what age, Dominica, it's about how long you've been doing the reading program for. Generally, we recommend doing the reading program, single words program, for at least 1 month before you move to the couplets. Then usually we do a month of the couplets and then we begin sentences. Okay, please note, even when you begin couplets in month 2 and sentences in month 3, you don't stop the single words. You keep showing single words because we need the children to have a large reading vocabulary. Okay, but I mean, given how long, well, you said your baby is 5.5 months old, so you've been doing things for about 1.5 months. So if you've been able to do single words consistently, you're ready to start with the couplets. Okay, let's see the next question. So she says here, in the Italian flashcards, which are in black color, and they're smaller than the red single word flashcards. In the Doman book, I read that red font should be used up to 1 year old and more, as I remember. So generally, Dominica, yeah, red. We like to start with red color, especially with babies, because it's bright, it's easier to see. But that being said, the vast majority of children see black well and are happy to learn to read in black. Red is just a little catchier. So if black text is what you have, then that's going to be much better than no reading program, right? Most children are going to be more than happy with black. In fact, most children won't even show much of a difference between black and red. But there are a small group of children who just seem to be a bit more interested in red. So my recommendation for you with your Italian reading program is get started with the black text if that's what you have, and let's see how it goes. Okay, we've got another question here. Do you recommend doing 2 or more languages in the Doman reading program at the same time, if we have time to do it? The answer is yes. If you have time to do it, we definitely recommend doing 2 languages or more. I just recommend starting in one language and reaching the Doman books stage of that reading program, which is usually in about month 4, in the first language before you start the second language. So try to get all the way to Doman books in the first language, then add the second language, because that really means your first language is going consistently. If you try to start 2 languages at once, sometimes that can be overwhelming for parents. And the last thing we'd want is a parent to bite off more they can chew, and then they decide, oh, I can't do this, right? Now the child gets no program. That's the worst case scenario. So better to make sure you can do one language program consistently. And then when you reach Doman books, add the second language. All right. I've got a question here from Allison. Allison has started to teach her 2-year-old the Doman math program, and she's using the poker chips as outlined in the Math Before School program. And she says, every time my child sees 4 poker chips or 4 of anything, he says 5. He does really good with the quantities 0, 1, 2, 3, and 5. It's just 4 that he has trouble with. What is the best way to resolve this? Okay, good question, Allison. Well, first of all, I wouldn't let this stop you from moving on to the next step of the program, okay? Because some parents at this moment might say, okay, I'm just going to keep drilling the poker chips, the quantities, and sometimes that can really drive a child crazy. So it's best for you to move on to step 2 with the math program and move on to, how we teach the number symbols, the numerals, and later addition. Now, what I would recommend you do is maybe once or twice a day, probably what is happening is this might be a speech challenge for your child where for some reason the word 4 is difficult. And, both 5 and 4, please note, they start with the letter F, similar sounds. And maybe for a 2-year-old, it's an articulation challenge. Or there might be some confusion between the quantities 4 and 5. I'd probably do 2 activities with a 2-year-old at this level. The first thing is I just count throughout the day with the child, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So, because with the poker chips, you're focusing on quantities, but not so much counting per se. And if your child just gets a high repetition of hearing 1 through 10 counted, they get to hear 4 and 5 named separately, okay? Right, 4, 5, it might help your child with distinguishing between those 2 words, those 2 sounds, and the quantities. The other thing that I would probably do is just maybe during the day, point out the quantities 4 and 5 with the child, back to back. So I'd show maybe 4 and say, that's 4. And then I'd show 5 and say, that's 5. Because again, my guess is this is maybe a confusion between 4 and 5 or a speech articulation issue. And either way, showing those 2 things back to back for your child, so your child can kind of take in, these are 2 separate quantities. Words sound a little similar, but they're different. I think that'll be enough for your child. So count throughout the day, okay? Let your child hear it, and then also show the different quantities 4 and 5 throughout the day. Your child, even just seeing the numerical symbols, it might solve this problem. Okay. Let's move. We've got a couple more questions Priti asks, when will the results show? Now, Priti only asked that question. That could mean a lot of things. That could mean, when will the results of the Doman reading program show? Or when will the results of the Doman math program show, right? Because there are a lot of different Doman programs. So Priti, to answer your question, when will the results show? It depends, child to child, right? Each kid is different. So, some children within a couple weeks are already showing results. Other children are maybe a bit more reserved. That some children love to show off their new abilities. Some children are a bit more reserved. They're a bit more passive, taking in information. If you've taken the reading before school and math before school courses, you'll see we do have classes on problem solving, which is about how do you help your child start to show and use the information they've learned with the reading and math program. So if you've signed up for the reading and math before school courses, I would review those classes about how to do problem solving, with choices where you're holding up word cards, you're holding up math cards. I think that's going to be a really good way to help elicit feedback from your child. All right. I've got a couple more questions here from Dominica, and then I can take questions from the audience. I see we've started to get some questions on Instagram, so I will get to those in a second. I'm just starting with all the parents who have pre-submitted questions on the Doman Learning Parent Facebook group. So Dominica's next question is, how can we ask a baby? Oh, no, sorry. The next question is, we have just finished the dots quantity cards, and we are continuing showing mixed equations using dots, like addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. At what age should we introduce flashcards with numbers and math signs? So again, Dominica, this isn't about age. It's about where you are in the math program process. And, in the math before school course, we explained that after you've taught the quantities, which you have done, and you've gone through the 4 operations, you've done that. The next step would be teaching the numerical symbols. So if you've gone through all of the operations, you're ready to start that now, and you can get started with it. And the math sign flashcards as well. Absolutely. All right. Next question is, how can we ask our baby about the right answer? For example, if the answer is 12 or 5, when we have a 5 or 6 month old toddler. Okay, so what we always do, Dominica, when we are evaluating a child is we always do it by giving choices. So you use the example of, what if the choices are 12 or 15, right? You could hold up a card with the number 12 or the quantity 12, another card with the quantity 15, and you just say to your child, where's 15? Okay. Usually, especially with a young child who could be easily distracted, right? There are always distractions in the environment. I like to ask the question before I hold up the cards. So I would look at the child and I'd say, like, all right, buddy, let's find 15. So I tell them before I do anything. So now they know what we're looking for. I'll say, let's find 15. And then I hold up the cards, right? So now I'm holding up 12 and 15. Now, a 5 or 6 month old will usually answer just by looking, right? They may not have good enough manual skills to grab the card. Some children will, but others won't. Many children will just look at the answer. And when they look at the answer, it's very important that you acknowledge it. You just say, yes, that's 15. Great job. So that way they get feedback that you understood their answer. Okay. So it's very possible to do that kind of problem solving with babies, but you just have to watch where do they look and then acknowledge them. Okay. The acknowledgement is essential, right? Saying, yes, that's right. That's 15. So they get that feedback. Great question. All right. Now we're on the last pre-submitted question. When do we recommend introducing Doman cards, the Encyclopedic Knowledge Program, now at the same time as reading and math? Would that be okay? So the answer is you could absolutely start now, Dominica, because you've already started a reading and math program. This is a great time to start Doman cards. By the way, we have a course at domanlearning.com called the Gift of Knowledge course, which has 450 Doman cards for you to get started with. They also have facts on the back of the cards that you can teach your child. So you probably want to look at the Gift of Knowledge course. All right, great questions. And it's great to see so many parents here who are doing such a committed program. I'll just repeat, if you're going to get anything at domanlearning.com, if you're going to sign up for the reading course, the math course, the Gift of Knowledge course, just use Spencer10 at checkout for a 10% discount. All right, let me go to a question that we have here on Instagram. We have an Instagram question from Glow Drops, and they are asking, I'm at the end of month 2 of the Reading Before School program, and my 15-month-old, but she's not totally interested in the couplets. She loves images. What shall I do? Okay, good question. Yeah, because if you're using the Reading Before School materials, the words do have images, but the couplets do not, right? The couplets and sentences do not. When you get to the Doman books in month 4, there will be pictures with those, okay? My feeling is just start to reduce the frequency of the couplets, right? So if you're doing them maybe 3 times in a day, go to 2 times, okay? Make sure you're doing those sessions quickly too. You're showing the cards quickly so they don't feel like they're taking a long time. What I like to do with a child who loves the pictures and words, and maybe they're kind of less excited with the couplets, I would show the couplets first and then follow it up with the words and pictures, right? So you say, okay, let's see our couplets, red apple, yellow banana, you teach those. And then you put them down and you say, okay, now let's do the words, right? So it's a little bit like you get the dessert at the end of the meal. It's a good way to keep children encouraged and make the whole session fun. Great question. All right. So I've got a question here. Is it possible to work with bits when who receives the program is a healthy 8-year-old child who does not have reading fluency, and the math program can be applied with older children to facilitate learning? So the answer is yes. So the reading program for an 8-year-old, if they have reading fluency issues, like they're slow readers, or if the child has low reading comprehension, or even if a child's been diagnosed with dyslexia, for example, the reading program is phenomenal. Okay, I highly recommend it. Even in the Math Before School course, there is a module for children under 2.5 years of age and a module for over 2.5 years. If you have a child, even who's 8 years old, but is having challenges in math or their mental math is not strong, you can absolutely use the Math Before School course and materials for an 8-year-old. And I would highly recommend it. Now, I want to make one other comment here, because if we're talking about a child who might have learning difficulties, okay, absolutely the Doman learning courses can be a help. But I would recommend, if you have a child who has learning difficulties, real challenges in school, I would recommend you read the book that I wrote with my dad, The Doman Method from Special Needs to Wellness, okay, by Douglas and Spencer Doman. You can find it on Amazon, basically everywhere in the world. For children with any kind of learning or developmental issues, this book is essential because the Doman reading and math program will be very helpful for children with learning difficulties, but there might be underlying brain development issues that need to be addressed with other treatments. And so for those children, I'd recommend this book. Good question. All right, I've got another question here on Instagram from Manar. Manar says, what if my child chooses a wrong answer? He is crawling always to the left side, whether it's the wrong or the right answer for quantity dots. Okay, Manar. So I'm guessing by the way you're asking this question that you're putting the cards down on the ground and having your child crawl to the correct answer. Now, this method does work with some children. Okay, I've seen certain children do this well. I actually watched a child a couple weeks ago do this. But my preferred method is, first of all, I want children to be able to see the materials easily. If you put materials down on the ground, many children are so small, they can't even see the materials from where they are. So they're just going to crawl to whatever is the closest or easiest option. Okay. So first of all, I like to hold cards up when I do problem solving. And the other thing is I want to be close to the child because young children have immature vision. And I don't want to make it difficult for them to answer. I want to make it easy. So that's why I wouldn't necessarily have a child crawl to an answer unless they've shown you that that's easy for them. Otherwise, I would hold up the cards and say, hey, where's the choice? Where's the word banana, for example? Minar, once in a while, I will see a child who always chooses one side. For some reason, they always go for the left side. They always go for the right side. For those children, it's almost so simple, it's silly. My favorite thing to do is instead of going side by side, I go up and down. Okay. And for some reason, many children, as soon as you make this change, so you hold the banana here and the word apple here, many children will then they'll get it correct when it's one above the other. I think it's because some children just have a tendency to look at one side first, and they will sometimes, for those children, they'll opt for that one side. All right, we've got a question here from Allison. Allison says, when you make a homemade book for your child, how many of the new words do you need to introduce before you show the book? Do you introduce all the really boring words like the, at, etc.? Okay, Allison, I'm going to start with your second question first. You do not need to teach the boring words, okay, which are words that usually those are called articles, right? Words like the, at, a. They're boring because they're meaningless, right? If I asked you, I could probably go to the smartest person in the world and say, what's the definition for the word the? And they'd say, I don't know. It's a filler word, Yeah, exactly. So you don't have to show those words as single words. Generally, answering the second part of your question, Allison, let me just, sometimes we have to differentiate between what's ideal and what's possible, okay? What is ideal is for a child to see every word in a Doman book before it's shown. That's ideal. And that's why if you look at the Reading Before School course, all the Doman books that we have in that course, the children are shown the words before they see the book, okay? That's ideal. Now, in reality, is it a problem if there are a couple of new words in a book? Not really, okay? And I always say to parents, don't hold up showing books because your child hasn't seen every word in it. Because children love the Doman books. They eat them up. And the last thing we want to do is hold the child back from seeing books. So ideally, try to show the words before they show up in a book. But worst case scenario, if there are some new words in a book, it's completely fine. Your child will still love it and they'll still learn how to read. All right. Let's see what else we've got here. We're getting some more questions. We're getting a lot of questions on YouTube, which is great. We've got a question here from Merrill. I'll just call you Merrill. I started to teach my 3-year-old quantities with chips. From 0 to 5 was okay, but after when he needed to say the numbers, he didn't want to. And with 6 to 10, he sometimes didn't even want to look at the chips. Okay, my guess is here that your young child, sometimes children have challenges with 6 through 10. But the most important thing that I say to parents is that your child recognizes quantities 1 through 5. If your child recognizes quantities 1 through 5, that is a great foundation to begin teaching math on. Even most adults can recognize visually up to the quantity 6. And then once you put more than 6 in front of an average adult, they will have to start doing addition, right? So if you put 7 coins on a table, most adults will look at those and they'll say, all right, 4 and 3, that's 7. They group them in smaller groups visually. So if a young child can recognize up to 5, you're in good shape. Move on to the next step in the Math Before School program. Okay, your kid's going to be fine. Just keep going. And then why did he not want to say the numbers? He probably didn't want to say the numbers because he wasn't confident, right? So 1 through 5, he was probably confident. He knew them. And then once you started to get above 5, he wasn't confident. And so he probably kind of went into a shell a little bit. Kids do that sometimes. Don't worry about it. Just keep moving. Your child has the foundational innate number sensibility that he needs to begin mathematical operations. Okay, perfect. And then, yeah, Meryl is saying, okay, what would be the best way to teach the quantities up to 10? So probably what's going to happen with your child, like most adults, what your child is going to learn to do is to group quantities. So, for example, your child will, like I said, gave the example of 7. He might look at 7, and once he's learned addition, he'll look at 4 and 3, and together add it to 10. Sorry, 4 and 3, he'll add it to 7, right? So, the most important thing now, because he's got this innate number sensibility, he's ready to start learning math operations. And the most important thing is we want to teach a child to, first of all, the most important thing is to love math, because children who love math are much more likely to have success in math in school. But the next most important thing is to help a child have innate number sense, which your child now has, and to do mental math quickly, right? Which, if a child can do mental math quickly, it makes higher math so much easier. So, and by the way, when children have success with mental math, that's when they usually start to enjoy mathematics, right? Children who even aren't on the Doman program, you'll usually find the kid who's the fastest kid in addition in first grade is also the kid who likes math. And the kid who has difficulty with addition dislikes it, because children naturally enjoy the things that they're good at. So yeah, move on to the next step in the math program. Your kid is ready for it. It's great to be having so many parents joining this session who are already doing successful programs. It just leads to really great questions. All right. Well, everyone, we have 2 minutes left. So I'm happy to take any questions. If you want to throw your questions in, whether you're joining me right now on YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram, go ahead and add them. As I said before, if you want to get any course at domanlearning.com, you can use the coupon code Spencer10 to get 10% off at checkout. Noah, you can let me know if there's anything else you want me to say. My brother Noah helps me with these sessions, and he usually knows what's going on better than me. Noah said, all good. All right, perfect. I'll give everyone about maybe 20 more seconds to see if anyone else wants to post a question. While we're waiting for the last question, just to let everyone know, we have released a course in the last few months at domanlearning.com called the Doman Baby Course. I highly recommend that course for any parent who has a baby under 6 months of age, or who is expecting a child, or one day is planning to have a child. That course teaches you all the visual, auditory, and tactile stimulation that we recommend doing in the first 6 months of life, as well as what are the activities you can do with a baby to help them learn how to crawl, creep, and walk as young as possible. We also have things like speech development activities, manual development activities. So all kinds of great recommendations in that course. It's also a great gift for any parent of a baby or parent expecting a child. All right, last question. Would it make sense to sorry, I'm trying to figure out what this question means. For example, 2 dots, then numbers, 2 dots, 7 dots, then the number 7. If I understand correctly, if you mean, okay, got it. Okay, this parent is asking a very clever question, which is they're basically asking, similar to the Doman reading program where we show picture and then word, like the picture of an elephant and then the word elephant. They're asking, could we show a quantity followed by the numerical symbol, like the quantity 2 followed by the numerical symbol 2? That is an amazing question. Probably the first time I've ever been asked this in 15 years. And the answer is, I don't see any reason why you shouldn't do that. Usually we teach all the quantity cards first, then we teach the numerical symbols. But to your point, if you've already taught the quantities, okay, if you've already taught the quantities, I have no issues with teaching this way. Now, if you have not taught the quantities, Now I know why we don't usually recommend it. Now I've realized why. Because we want a child to learn innate number sense first. We want them to learn the quantities first before we teach them the numerical symbols. So that's why we teach quantities and then move on to numerical symbols. But that being said, if you've taught the quantities and now you want to teach the numerical symbols, I see no problem in teaching a quantity on a card and then showing a card right afterwards with the symbol. Great question. Now I'm learning from all of you. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. As I said, this is the last Q&A of the year, and we'll pick back up in January. Check out domanlearning.com if you haven't already. Look at all of our courses there. And thanks so much for joining. Bye, everyone.